All right, I'm Richard Heathen, and this is Liberty Machine News. I'm a little under the weather, so I've got a wingman to help me out today. Today I'm joined by Josh Steffler, one of the head organizers for We Are Change Victoria, and a part-time contributor to Liberty Machine News. Hey, Josh, how you doing?
Great, Richard. Thanks for having me on.
Well, today I wanted to talk to you about the new pipeline being approved today, recently this week, and how that kind of fits into the militant far left agenda, and how what's going to become of that, because it seems like the far leftists are really kind of mobilizing to take down, get actually violent with blocking this pipeline. As a liberty-minded person, I don't really take a side in this debacle because, as far as I'm concerned, it's the state trying to impose their wills on everyone else. But on the other side of the spectrum, you've got the far left who are equally as violent, and I think if they had their way, we would be under a worse tyranny than what we have now. What do you have to say about that?
Well, I am definitely concerned about the radicals that are, and I wouldn't even call them radical left. It is the deep green resistance, the DGR. They like the left is pussycats compared to
Well,
these
you have
guys.
to understand there's the center left, which is your basic kind of Democrats and
Yeah,
whatever else, and then you have the far left, which is like basically anarcho-communists and basically eco-terrorists, and the whole privilege thing, that kind of nut bar out there, idiotic, just lunacy,
yeah.
utter lunacy.
The ones that see like anarcho-communist just doesn't make any sense. They want complete control by a state, but then they say they don't want the state. They're not anarcho-communists, they're anti-capitalists.
They're just communists, really.
Yeah, brutal communists. But this pipeline, they have all these conditions that are set to be approved before it goes through. And then BC, our premier, has said that there's 5 conditions that must be met as well. So it's not like the pipeline is going to be built tomorrow. And they've got a lot of work going through. And, you would have thought that with the Lac Megantic or whatever, remember the big train explosion that took out that city in Quebec where they were hauling oil by train, that, you would think pipelines are a bit safer than the trains. So, and then we know that with Agenda 21, a lot of the energy, it's like about control, right? And they want to control everything. Well, how do you control people? By controlling energy. And if you cut off a supply of energy, you can easily control people. But as a libertarian, I'm not opposed or for any pipelines. What I oppose is the government running roughshod over people's property rights. If they have permission to build these pipelines through the lands that they're on, and then there should be no problem. The problem comes when the state starts using eminent domain, which is another part of Agenda 21, to push these things through. And I have concerns that our oil and bitumen, whatever it is that they're mining in the oil sands, is going straight to a communist country, China. And I'm all for free trade, but free trade, not NAFTA, not
Preferential
FIPA.
crony capitalism. No, I want to focus on Agenda 21 because I want to kind of make sure we're clear here, because the oil issue is a little bit different from Agenda 21, but the reason I'm bringing up Agenda 21 is the radicals who are against this, they're funded by foundations who are pushing a United Nations agenda, and it's about using state power to kind of ration the amount of resources and how we consume things. So sorry, I'm kind of getting off track here. Like I said, I'm a little bit sick. My mind just kind of isn't really focusing as well as it usually does. But you have to understand, on one hand, you have the activists, the communists, the Marxists, the revolutionary Marxists, as I call them, on the one end, and they're getting foundation money from the Rockefellers and all these other foundations, and then on the other hand, you've got like the International Institute for Sustainable Development, which gets government money, but it also gets money from the Rockefellers, and then you have all these other these sustainable development initiatives that are getting money from foundations like the Rockefeller Foundation or the Rockefeller Brothers Foundation. Those are two separate foundations that are connected. Tides Foundation,
George Soros.
Yeah, all those guys. And so you have what is a really excellent strategy. They're funding both the professional side in that they're funding the think tanks and all these institutions that basically write policy for the state, and on the other side, they're funding the radical activists. And so it really is I think I've heard the term full spectrum dominance, and I think that really applies here because they're funding both sides to make it look like, well, on the one hand, there's a real grassroots movement. If you look at any of the coverage of these kind of slacktivists, these shills, these bought and paid for collectivist whores, they're the same retards who come into all the far left protests. Greg Renoff has documented their exploits quite
extensively. It seems to be the same characters over and over again. And out here, we've got Tracy Park, and we've got the Dogwood Initiative, and we've got, it seems to be the same players over and over.
Oh,
and
yeah.
they have two sides. On the one side, they have their legal and clean-cut NGOs. But on the other side of the coin, they're funding these very dangerous people that are talking about sabotage, that are talking about direct action, which, on one thing, direct action can be like going and replanting a forest that you don't own or whatever. But that's not what these guys mean. When they say direct action, these are black bloc anarchists that think about smashing windows, lighting cars on fire, damaging property, and instilling fear and terror into people to get what they want, which, makes everybody lose. Everybody loses when the black bloc is involved.
Oh, exactly. And I really want to kind of hammer out why anarcho-capitalists, why libertarians, with voluntarists, whatever term you choose to kind of use to describe yourself, we need to kind of describe why these people are a danger. They're trying to use the money they get. They're trying to harness state power to basically implement like draconian Marxist collectivist initiatives in on every level of government. They want carbon taxes. They want the people. They want people off the land because people are dangerous parasites on nature, according to these vermin. And I'll talk a bit later. But why don't you elaborate on what I've said? What are your experience with the far left anarcho primitive syndicalists, whatever that ridiculous name they want to call themselves? I know you've had a lot of hands-on action. We've covered this on my live show, but we're broadcasting for a new audience on the here on the Voluntary Virtues Network. So why don't you try and explain to this audience of anarcho-capitalists why these people are so dangerous and why they should care?
They should care because these people are influencing our politicians, and they put on this cloak of green and this cloak of compassion that they do these things because they care, but they don't care. They want to smash Western society out of existence. They hate capitalism, but they don't understand what capitalism is. They think capitalism is Walmart and all these mega conglomerate corporations that are getting crony capitalist deals that are also using the force of the state to give themselves tax exemptions, and then they get bylaws written that exempt them from certain property taxes or building codes. So these people, they're so dangerous. I've had a few run-ins with them where they're totally willing to use violence to get their ways. And that's not the voluntarist or anarcho-capitalist way. A voluntary society is based on win-win. You know, I trade with you, you trade with me, we're both happy. But socialists or these radical lefts seem to think that, oh, well, if I trade with you, but they think that what I'm trading with you isn't the same value or I'm ripping you off, then it's not a good deal. And they function on this win-lose situation where they seem to think that profit means that for somebody to profit, somebody has to lose. And that's not true. If you have 2 apples and I have 3 oranges, you know, I want 2 apples and I'm willing to trade you my 3 oranges. Do either of us actually lose? No, because you're willing to trade, I'm willing to trade.
Well, they are basically economically illiterate, and they view any sort of trading of labor for wage as exploitation.
And it's so easy to debunk when you take even the most basic economics course. But the problem is that these people have infiltrated so much, including our education system. And like in BC, we have the BC Teachers Federation, which is a union that also helps provide the curriculum for these students and these kids. So they're brought up by the state, not taught economics, not taught any sort of like solid foundation for even the beginnings of economics. They're taught that the government's always right, and you know, the government would never let things happen to you that aren't fair and socially just. But when you look at any sort of Austrian economist, you can see why these people are they're morons. They have no concept of economics, like the minimum wage laws, and they push these minimum wage laws in Seattle. They're going to $15 an hour, and they think that, oh wow, this is great, this is awesome, everybody's going to get $15 an hour. But when you understand economics, you understand that that's actually going to hurt the poor because people are going to lose jobs. If you've only got $30 an hour for jobs, you could hire 3 people at $10 an hour or 2 people at $15 an hour. What's going to happen to that third person? And then what's going to happen with the costs of everything that are going to skyrocket because now you've got to pay more and more and more. And it's not a voluntary interaction. So
no, well, the state warps and manipulates and just distorts the economy so much through its machinations. But I want to focus on Agenda 21 because
Sure.
As far as I can tell, and I've studied Agenda 21 extensively. Agenda 21 really is a revolution in statism. It's almost like statism on steroids. It's hyper controlling everything that you do, and the fake opponents of Agenda 21, or the fake opponents who say Agenda 21 doesn't matter, they will say, "Oh, it's a voluntary thing. It's not mandatory." No one's arguing that it's mandatory. The problem is there's a network of bureaucrats feeding off the the tit of the state that are part of this network that Maurice Strong has set up here in Canada, at least, and they're using they are using the state to implement this. So yes, they don't have to do it. I've never argued once that they had to do it, that it was mandated. What I'm arguing is that they are doing it, and that it's tyranny. Your comments.
And they do it in like a shadow government because the government officials, they're all elected heads of ministries, heads of state. It's these bureaucrats that have 30, 40, 50 years in their department. And, like everybody has heard about sustainable development, but they're not really aware that actually came from Agenda 21. Like, in a nutshell, Agenda 21 calls for governments to take control of all land use and not leave any decisions for people that are for any decisions in the hands of private property owners. And it's assumed that the people are not good stewards of their land, that they won't take care of it, and that the government will do a better job if they're in control. And that individual rights in general are to give way to the needs of the communities as determined by these shadow governments, their ministries and their diktats. People, they also, like, Agenda 21 is talking about rounding people up off the land, out of rural communities, and packing them into human settlements, or, like, I think they call them islands of human habitation, that are close to employment centers and mass transit, So, like, the Wildlands Project in the States, and I can't remember what it's called up in Canada, but it totally spells out how the land is to be set aside for non-humans. And it's a huge amount of land that we could be using, but instead you're going to be rounded up, packed into these micro lofts, which are another problem coming from, again, lack of understanding of economics. So they think, oh, well, this is great. We'll stack and pack the housing, not realizing that just because you have a more dense city doesn't mean that the costs actually go down. When density goes up, costs go up. And so you get stacked into these little cities, or into these mega cities, in a little tiny apartment. You've got no room for self-sufficiency because you're in a building, so you've got to now deal with a strata, and you're not allowed to hang your clothes out to dry, so that's not allowed. You're not allowed to hang solar panels on your roof. You're not allowed to garden. You don't have room to garden. People don't have backyards anymore. And they're, like, you understand that there is a big depression coming. Some big bubbles are about to burst. And back in the 30s, when we were hit with this depression, a lot of people had big backyards that they grew food in all the time, and that they had, mostly it was wives that stayed home and preserved the food so that they could get through these hard times. But when you're stacked and packed, you're not going to have this stuff. So where do you go? You have to rely on the government, on the state, on more violence to get what you need. And it's wrong. It's totally wrong. We should definitely have a say in how this is being implemented, if it should be implemented, and it should not be implemented by stealth by these little sneaky bureaucrats that hide behind elected officials so that the elected guys don't have to talk about it. Don't worry. Here's the keywords: sustainable development, unsustainable practices, business as usual. We make all these good and bad buzzwords, and then we take control.
Well, the thing is, it's happening all over. I had some. Actually, I want to talk about before I forget. I want to talk about your rally, because you're doing a rally against Agenda 21 in Victoria, and I salute you on that. You're facing a lot of opposition on the on the event page. There was some creepy little leftist come on and try and slander everyone and say Agenda 21 wasn't happening. I exposed him as Michael Albert. He's just a little creep who likes to make threats behind a computer screen, but along with other liberty activists who helped basically outed this guy. Mm-hmm. Now all of a sudden he's all quiet because he doesn't. People like that can't make threats of violence when they're exposed, because then they might actually have to be held accountable for them because they're little cowards. I'm calling you, Michael Albert, a little fucking coward, you piece of shit.
Oh, he's totally a coward.
No, I'm sorry. I shouldn't go off like that. It's unprofessional. But that, that really that shit really boils my blood. You're gonna threaten me. You're gonna threaten to kick our asses, give us a boot fucking. Oh, sorry. You know what? Back to the issues. But I wanted to bring up this rally because you're doing really good work exposing what I call statism on steroids with Agenda 21, and I'm hoping it'll be a success for you. I did one in Edmonton about a couple weeks ago. It was a great success. Had some people show up, spoke truth to power. A lot of people were looking at us. We had elementary school students who were there on a field trip. I was able to talk to them about property rights and global governance and all this and the paradigm of statism. It was actually funny once I started talking about how they're being indoctrinated with they're being indoctrinated into the cult of statism through their teachers. Their teachers shooed them away. Anyways, your thoughts on what I've said?
We face some opposition against Agenda 21 in Victoria. We have a few, like the former Green Party leader, Joan Russo, who has told me to my face that I could not have read Agenda 21 because everybody that reads it agrees with it, because she has this morally superior attitude that she's saving the earth. We also have Elizabeth May, who I interviewed, who said Agenda 21 isn't happening. It's just a right wing conspiracy. She wishes it was happening, but it's not. And
Well,
the thing is,
she's then Elizabeth May's either a liar or she's not paying attention. The tenets of sustainable development are happening at this day, and they're happening in Ontario through the endangered species legislation, and a new government bureaucracy called, well, it's not new now, but it's a few years old, Casero. It's basically, I'm looking it up on Google right now because I was able to, reason I know about this, I interviewed a land use developer called Jessica Annis, who now helps people who were fighting against this overreaching bureaucracy fight back. And according to Google, because I was actually looking for what the exact acronym means, but all I'm able to find is it's the Ontario Ministry of Natural Resources, and they're actually they're contracting government services or duties out to NGOs, which, it's debatable if that's, some people think that's not as bad of a thing because it's still government, but you're having these people who are driven ideologically to shut down industry, basically in unelected positions, which, think what you want about elections, but at least that an election offers the smallest amount of accountability for someone. These people are not even, these bureaucrats aren't even accountable to anyone. They cannot be removed. Their decisions cannot be overturned. This is like literal Soviet style. We're going from like a classical kind of we've gone far down the road to tyranny, but we're really turning a corner here when we're handing unelected bureaucrats power to just suspend and economically sterilize people's land and tell them what they can and cannot do with it in the name of course, sustainability. They're doing the same thing in Alberta through the Alberta Land Stewardship Act. It's happening all over. It's happened in the United States. What do you think the Bundy Ranch was about? He was the last of 52 or 53 ranchers in that area. They're getting people off the land. It's
happening. It is happening. When these politicians say that it's not happening and that it's still up for debate, it's not. You're right. On the Bundy Ranch, they use the force of the state to get these guys off. And it was amazing to see how the people could actually come together and defend the Bundy farmer. It's not about this guy just didn't want to pay his fair share. He was entitled to be there. He was there for his family had been there longer than the government existed itself. So where does this authority come from? And I'd like to talk about ICLEI if we
sure,
could.
bring up ICLEI.
So for people listening, if you're wondering if Agenda 21 is being implemented in your town, you can go to Google or whatever search engine you use, or even your city hall, and ask about ICLEI, which is the International Council for Local Environmental Initiatives. And ICLEI is this non-governmental organization that is tasked with carrying out the goals of Agenda 21 worldwide. So these bureaucrats sign on, and it's not even your mayor and your city council that are doing this. It's city managers, it's city financial officers that are getting these things, and they're signing on all in the name of lowering carbon and saving the environment, and it's time that people educate themselves, go online and actually read UN Agenda 21 and the related commentary. In BC, we get most of our power from hydroelectric dams. Most people understand that hydroelectric dams are pretty sustainable energy. It's low pollution, if not, no pollution, really. Well, under UN Agenda 21, hydroelectric dams are considered unsustainable. So this will affect you. It will cost you.
It,
It will cost you. It will drive your power bills up. When you see Barack Obama shutting down all these coal plants, yes, coal is bad. What's worse, having a bit of coal burned or having people with no electricity in a city that, you need electricity to live, or all of a sudden you start having what are called blighted areas where now the government can use eminent domain, come in and take over these properties and demolish low-income housing, build nice green, super sustainable buildings that most poor people can't afford, so it really hurts the poor.
The problem is, like, Agenda 21, I've read it, it's full of euphemisms and doublespeak, and it's really hard to kind of make hide or hair of what they're trying to say. But if you read in between the lines, it's very anti-property, and it's advocating state action for just about anything.
It's highly anti-property, highly anti-private property, and if you read between the lines, it pushes to abolish all private property and put you in a state-built, they'll call it a city, but it's a concentration camp because you're not allowed out.
Well, exactly. That's another thing. That's another thing. That's actually an excellent point that you drawn on, Josh. They're actually another part of the Sustainable Development Initiative is to create no-go zones for human beings. So they'll have the state control the vast majority of the land. It already does. In Alberta, where I live, the state controls something like 80% of the land, but at least you can kind of go on public land. They're trying to change it now. One of the tenets of Agenda 21 is no-go zones for humans. So you cannot there'll be places where you cannot go. If you're caught going, you'll be charged. They're having like sensors and things put onto make sure that people aren't going where they're not supposed to. No, the whole thing is just absolutely ridiculous, and it's really Orwellian in nature. It's funny because a lot of people don't really. They'll see it's bad, but they don't know how bad it really is. This is like a control freak's like wet dream, and it's being implemented.
And the world is going to look drastically different in 20 years. It's that cheesy line from the Terminator that there is no future but what we make. And this Agenda 21 does not have to go forward. Liberty-minded people that value private property, voluntary interactions, and real old-school capitalism where it's win-win-win, these people need to identify their elected officials who are promoting these UN policies and hold them accountable. Get them out. They need to start. Well, they don't need to, but what I do is I engage in the political system. I know that it's violent and I know that it's totally immoral. The thing is, it's a
platform. It's a platform for expressing ideas. If you run as a candidate, people will automatically grant you legitimacy because there's that mental projection that they think that all of a sudden because you're running for office that somehow you're more qualified than they are. It's a mind game, but it is actually it's a very helpful one if you can use that platform as a way to express ideas. Because
and there are many roads to freedom and liberty, and this is just one road on the political action road. And we have people that are very skilled in political speech and political activism, like Ron Paul. So if it wasn't for Ron Paul and me discovering this guy, I wouldn't care about running in politics. I would think that I wouldn't be a libertarian
without Ron Paul. We don't have much time left, Josh, but before we go, I want to kind of switch gears again. I want to talk about what I see as a potential danger, because it seems like all these guys we haven't even mentioned Derek Jensen yet, that little creep.
Well, he believes that it's okay to blow up dams.
Yeah. He says we need to blow up dams. We need to blow up the electrical grid. We need people to do these things. Of course, the little coward would never do it himself. The thing is, you have all these people.
About the people that died.
No, that's not your responsibility, according to him. But the thing is, when I get it across is there's a lot of these people who are kind of following his words and his philosophy. There was a training exercise for activists in Edmonton, and a lot of these far left-wing lunatics, and I'm talking about the basically ANCOMs and like anti-capitalist retards.
DGRs.
DGRs, Deep Green Resistance, all these retards. They're all coming in. They all
let's
they
not
all came to
insult
this.
mentally retarded people here.
Well, fair enough. I'm sorry.
They're
I'm
better
sorry.
than those guys.
You know what? You're actually right. I shouldn't disparage mentally handicapped people, because actually some of them are really nice.
A lot of them
warm. They are warm-hearted people. I should not disparage them like that.
Those commies are evil.
They are
that's
evil.
What they are.
You're right.
Evil. They're filled with hate. They're filled with violence. Their hearts have been hardened, and they don't care about you. They don't care about the environment. They just care about I'm protesting. I'm so trendy and liberal and progressive.
I totally agree. But the point I'm trying to get to is basically, I think that these people are going to are trying to mount some kind of pathetic revolution here in Canada. I really do. I think that their end goal is a Marxist revolution in Canada, and
they're Bolsheviks.
Yeah, they are. They're total Bolsheviks. Now, it's not likely to be a successful revolution, because basically they have not only fight the might of the Canadian Police Service or the RCMP and the military, but they'd also have to fight the American military if it came down to it. So it's not likely their little revolution, whatever they're planning, is not likely to succeed. My concern is it's going to be used as a pretext to crack down on anyone who is anti-state, anyone who has any legitimate beef with the state. The government is going to use them as a pretext to come after anyone and grossly expand its power. And so, what are your thoughts on that before we go?
You're right, and I definitely do not want to be lumped in with those people. While they say that they're anti-state, they're not. They're actually for really big state, and I am completely for dismantling the state and letting people voluntarily socially engineer their own society. These people are not, and we should definitely not be lumped in with them, and that's the danger, is that they pull these stupid stunts like blowing up dams or damaging the electrical grid or any sort of violent action, violent riots, and then anybody that's anti-state gets lumped in and cracked down. That'll bring the police boot, the police state authoritarian society that they say that they're against, that they'll actually be the method to bring that in, and the state will use them to win the hearts and minds of good people that are almost on the fence considering the violence and stuff of the state, but then they'll be scared. Oh my God, there's actually people in black that want to hurt me.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm going to run to the government for safety and security, and the government will socially engineer and manipulate these people into buying into the violence and aggression of the state and crack down on all of us.
All right, Josh. Well, I'm going to let go. I think we need to continue this conversation. I'm going to kind of end the show for the Voluntary Virtues Network, but I'm going to keep going. And people who want to see the rest of this video can go onto my YouTube channel, Richard Heathen, or the URL is youtube.com/deathmetalpatriot to watch the rest of this conversation. This is Liberty Machine News on the Voluntary Virtues Network, and I'm Richard Heathen. Thanks to my guest for joining me, Josh.
Can you do a shout out for my website?
Oh yeah, totally. What's your where can people find you?
People can find me at wearechange.victoria.org, and we're on Facebook, We Are Change Victoria Chapter, and we've got our television show, freedomfreeforall.com. Or freedomfreeforall.com is the website of our TV show.
All right, well, I'm going to go into overdrive now for my YouTube channel, because I think there's a lot we didn't cover that I kind of want to cover in this conversation.
Sure.
All right, and also Josh is a contributor to Liberty Machine News. He's written an article that is going up today, and so watch. Thanks for joining me on the VVN. If you want to see the rest of this conversation, head over to libertymachinenews.com or my YouTube channel. All right, thank you very much.